May 2, 1968, the jungles of Vietnam, west of Loc Ninh. 12 Special Forces soldiers are trapped, surrounded by an entire North Vietnamese Army battalion. Over 1,000 enemy soldiers closing in. 3 helicopters have already tried to save them. All 3 were driven back by withering fire. Then, listening to their desperate radio calls, one man makes a decision. Staff Sergeant Roy Benavidez jumps aboard a helicopter, heading back into hell. What happens next will become known as 6 Hours in Hell. This is the true story of Roy Benavidez, and by the time this day is over, he'll have 37 bullet, bayonet, and shrapnel wounds. The doctors will declare him dead, and he'll prove them wrong in the most dramatic way possible. Before we dive in, if you're new here, this channel tells real stories of courage and sacrifice. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Now, let me take you to Vietnam in 1968 and introduce you to a man who simply refused to die. Let me tell you about Roy Benavidez. Born in 1935 in Texas, the son of a Mexican farmer and a Yaqui mother. Both parents died from tuberculosis before he turned 7. Roy shined shoes and labored on farms just to survive. He joined the Army in 1952. In 1965, while serving in Vietnam, he stepped on a landmine. Doctors said he would never walk again and prepared his discharge papers. But Roy refused to quit. Every night, against doctors' orders, he crawled out of bed and taught himself to walk again. After months of excruciating practice that left him in tears, he stood up when doctors came with his discharge papers. Within 6 months, he could run 10 miles with a rucksack. He completed Special Forces selection and returned to Vietnam in 1967. So there he was in May 1968, assigned to Detachment B-56. That brings us to May 2nd. A 12-man Special Forces team was inserted into dense jungle west of Loc Ninh to gather intelligence. 3 Americans, 9 Montagnard tribesmen. They walked into an ambush. An NVA battalion surrounded them, about 1,000 enemy soldiers. 3 extraction helicopters were driven back by heavy fire. Roy was monitoring the radio when he heard the desperate calls. One of the trapped men was his friend, Sergeant First Class Leroy Wright. Without orders, Roy jumped aboard the next helicopter heading out. The helicopter couldn't land at the team's position. The pilot found a clearing 75 meters away. The helicopter hovered. Roy jumped out and ran toward his brothers through enemy fire. Before he reached them, bullets hit his leg, face, and head. He kept running. When he reached the team, the situation was desperate. Men were dead or too wounded to move, pinned down by fire from all sides. Despite his wounds, Roy took charge, repositioning men and directing their fire. He called in tactical airstrikes danger close, just to keep the NVA back. Then, a helicopter managed to land in a small clearing nearby. This was their chance. Roy began moving the wounded toward the aircraft. He was carrying them, dragging them, doing whatever it took. Picture this man, already wounded in 3 places, lifting and dragging grown men in full combat gear across contested ground under heavy fire. As he was loading wounded team members onto the helicopter, Roy was hit again. Small arms fire struck him in the abdomen. Grenade fragments tore into his back. He could feel the warm blood soaking his uniform, but he didn't stop. The helicopter managed to take off with some of the wounded, but there were still men on the ground. Roy and the remaining team members continued fighting, holding their position, waiting for another helicopter. During this time, an NVA soldier broke through their perimeter and came straight at Roy with a bayonet. The enemy soldiers stabbed Roy repeatedly. Roy pulled out his own knife and killed the soldier in hand-to-hand combat, leaving his knife buried in the enemy's body. By now, Roy had been fighting for hours. He'd been shot multiple times, hit by grenade fragments, and stabbed with a bayonet. His jaw was broken. He had wounds all over his body, but the mission wasn't over. There were still men to evacuate, and there were classified documents that couldn't fall into enemy hands. Another helicopter arrived. Roy directed the pilot to the landing zone, then continued the evacuation. He moved back and forth under constant fire, retrieving wounded team members, recovering bodies of the fallen, gathering classified documents and equipment. At one point, Roy was shot in the thigh. The bullet severed a major muscle. His leg could barely support his weight. He kept moving. The enemy fire intensified. Bullets were hitting all around him. Roy was hit again and again. Each time, he refused to go down. He had a job to do, and he was going to finish it. Finally, with the last of the team members loaded onto the helicopter, Roy climbed aboard. He'd been fighting for 6 hours straight. 6 hours of constant combat against overwhelming enemy forces. As the helicopter lifted off, Roy was still manning a machine gun, providing covering fire. When they reached the base, Roy tried to walk off the helicopter to help with the wounded. He collapsed. Medics rushed to him. They counted his wounds. 37 separate bullet, bayonet, and shrapnel wounds covering his body. His abdomen was torn open. His jaw was broken. He'd lost massive amounts of blood. The medical team worked frantically, but they couldn't find a pulse. They placed Roy in a body bag with the other dead and zipped it up. Roy was lying in that body bag when a friend recognized him and called for help. A doctor came over and examined him. The doctor couldn't find any signs of life. He was about to zip the body bag back up when Roy did something extraordinary. He spat in the doctor's face. That tiny act, using the last bit of strength he had left, saved Roy's life. The doctor realized he was alive and immediately began emergency treatment. Roy was evacuated to Brooke Army Medical Center at Fort Sam Houston, where he would spend months recovering from his wounds. Now here's where the story gets even more remarkable. On September 10, 1968, while Roy was still recovering in the hospital, he received a visitor. Lieutenant General William C. Westmoreland, the Chief of Staff of the United States Army, came to present him with the Distinguished Service Cross, the nation's second highest award for valor. But Roy's commander believed he deserved more. The problem was that the Medal of Honor required an eyewitness account, and everyone believed there were no living witnesses to Roy's actions that day. The time limit for the award had expired. It seemed Roy would never receive the recognition he truly deserved. For years, that's where the story ended. Roy retired from the Army in 1976 as a Master Sergeant. He went home to El Campo, Texas, with his wife Lala and their 3 children. He dedicated himself to helping others, especially underprivileged children, traveling around the country to speak at schools and encourage young people to work hard and forge their own futures. But then something remarkable happened. In 1980, a man named Brian O'Connor was on vacation in Australia when he picked up a newspaper. There, in the international section, was a story about Roy Benavidez reprinted from an El Campo newspaper. O'Connor couldn't believe what he was reading. Brian O'Connor had been the radio man on Roy's Special Forces team that day in May 1968. Roy had believed O'Connor was dead. But O'Connor had survived his wounds and been evacuated to the United States before anyone could fully debrief him. He'd been living in the Fiji Islands and had no idea that Roy had never received the Medal of Honor. O'Connor immediately contacted Roy and submitted a 10-page report of the encounter, confirming all the accounts and providing the crucial eyewitness testimony that had been missing all those years. On February 24, 1981, President Ronald Reagan presented Roy Benavidez with the Medal of Honor in the Pentagon. Reagan turned to the press and said something that perfectly captures Roy's story. If the story of his heroism were a movie script, you would not believe it. Then Reagan read the official citation, detailing Roy's actions on that May Day in 1968. When he finished, he presented Roy with the medal and said to him, "Sergeant Benavidez, a nation grateful to you and to all your comrades living and dead." awards you its highest symbol of gratitude for service above and beyond the call of duty, the Congressional Medal of Honor. But you know what's amazing? Even after receiving the Medal of Honor, Roy continued to serve. In 1983, he fought one last battle for his Vietnam War comrades, successfully advocating for a continuation of disability benefits for Vietnam veterans when the government tried to cut them. Roy Benavidez passed away on November 29, 1998, at the age of 63 at Brooke Army Medical Center, the same place where doctors had once declared him dead in a body bag. He was buried with full military honors at Fort Sam Houston National Cemetery in San Antonio. His legacy lives on in ways big and small. 3 elementary schools in Texas bear his name. The U.S. Navy named a cargo ship the USS Benavidez after him, an unprecedented honor for a Navy ship to be named after an Army sergeant. In 2001, the Texas legislature honored him with the Texas Legislative Medal of Honor. But perhaps the most fitting tribute comes from those who knew him. His fellow Special Forces soldiers say that when they're in a tough situation and courage needs to be summoned, they use the radio call sign, Tango Mike Mike, which stands for That Mean Mexican, Roy's nickname among his brothers in arms. Those who knew Roy describe him not as a superhero, but as an ordinary man who did extraordinary things. He was a man who refused to quit, whether he was teaching himself to walk again after doctors said it was impossible, or fighting for 6 hours with 37 wounds in his body because his brothers needed him. So this is the true story of Roy Benavidez, the man who jumped from a helicopter into hell, fought for 6 hours against impossible odds, saved 8 lives, and refused to die even when placed in a body bag. His story embodies the Special Forces motto, the Presso Liber, to free the oppressed. Stories like Roy's need to be told. They need to be remembered. That's why this channel exists. If this story moved you, if it made you think about courage and sacrifice in a new way, do me a favor. Hit that like button right now. It tells YouTube to share this story with more people. And if you haven't already, subscribe to this channel and hit the notification bell. Every week, I bring you true stories of extraordinary people in extraordinary circumstances. Stories of heroes like Roy Benavidez who deserve to be remembered. Drop a comment below and let me know. What do you think kept Roy going through those 6 hours? What would you want people to remember about you? I read every single comment, and I want to hear your thoughts. Next week, I'm covering another incredible Medal of Honor story that will leave you speechless. Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss it. Until then, remember, heroes aren't born. They're made through the choices they make when everything is on the line. I'll see you in the next one.